Solomon was the kind of man that women would dream about at night. When men looked at him, they would secretly wish they were like him. He was tall and stood straight, with a confidence that made him seem like a king. His skin was dark and smooth, as beautiful as a piece of wood that had been polished for a long time. His eyes were sharp and playful, always seeming to have a secret joke. And his smile. It was a perfect curve of white teeth that could melt even the coldest heart, like the sun melting ice. But Solomon wasn't just handsome. He had something else, a kind of magic charm that was hard to explain. It was the type of charm that could make married women forget the promises they made on their wedding day. It could make young girls blush so much that their faces would turn as red as ripe tomatoes. And it could even make old women, who thought their young feelings were long gone, giggle like teenagers again. He didn't need to try hard to get women to like him. They just came to him, drawn by something they couldn't quite understand. Some were attracted by his good looks, the way he stood, the shape of his face. Others were drawn in by his sweet words, the gentle and loving things he would say. His voice was as smooth as silk, and when he spoke, it felt like a warm breeze on a hot day. Because he was so easily able to attract women, some people in Oguduba started to whisper. They said he must be using juju, which is a kind of black magic, to make women fall in love with him. Others believed that he was simply born under a lucky star, a star that made him naturally attractive and seductive. Whatever the reason, Solomon didn't really care what people thought. He enjoyed all the attention he got from women, and he loved being the center of their desire. He would soak it all in, feeling happy and powerful, just like a lizard lying in the warm sun. The women who were drawn to Solomon came from all parts of Oguduba and from all walks of life. There was the young daughter of the village chief, who would giggle and hide her face whenever Solomon looked her way. There was the wife of the respected reverend, a woman known for her strong faith, who would suddenly find reasons to be near Solomon. Even the market woman, who was tough and always arguing about the price of her tomatoes, would become soft and shy when Solomon spoke to her. And then there were the wealthy older women, the sugar mummies who were powerful in the oil business, women who were used to being in charge, but who would become like young girls again around Solomon. Solomon had a special way with each of them. He would look into their eyes and smile that perfect smile. He would whisper sweet and flattering things that made each woman feel like she was the most special person in the world. He knew how to make them feel seen and desired, even if it was just for a short time. And once he had taken what he wanted, whether it was a night of passion or simply the pleasure of their attention, he would move on as easily as the wind changes direction. He never stayed for long, never made promises he didn't intend to keep, and never seemed to feel any guilt about leaving. "You can't tie down a river," he would often say with a knowing look in his eyes. "And I, my dear, am the Nile." He saw himself as something grand and unstoppable, something that couldn't be held in one place or belonged to just one person. His words were often repeated by the women he left behind, sometimes with sadness, sometimes with a strange kind of understanding. Solomon had a secret. Hidden carefully beneath his sleeping mat, where no one else would think to look, he kept a journal. It was a simple book, bound in soft leather that had become worn with use. Inside, he wrote down the name of every woman he had been with, every conquest he had made, every night of passion he had experienced. It was his private collection, his hidden trophy room, a record of his success with women that filled him with pride. He would sometimes take it out and read through the names, a small smile playing on his lips as he remembered each encounter. His friends, the few men who were close enough to him to offer advice, would sometimes warn him about his ways. They told him that he was playing a dangerous game and that he would eventually get hurt. They spoke of jealous husbands, angry fathers, and the pain he was causing. Even his late mother, before she passed away, had tried to talk to him. She had been a wise woman, and she had seen the path Solomon was on. "Solomon," she had said, her voice weak but full of love, "too much sweetness brings flies. You will attract trouble, and you won't even see the one that will sting you." But Solomon, caught up in his own world of charm and desire, never truly listened to their warnings. He thought he knew better, Solomon believed he was untouchable. He thought that his charm would always protect him, and that he could continue living his life the way he wanted without facing any real consequences. He moved through Ogadugba with a sense of invincibility, confident in his ability to win over anyone he desired. He thought he was in control of his own destiny, that he could navigate the complicated world of human relationships without ever getting hurt or hurting others in a way that would come back to haunt him. He was the sun, and the women of Ogadugba were like planets orbiting around his bright and irresistible light. Or so he thought. But in the shadows, something was stirring, something that would soon enter his life and change everything he thought he knew about himself and the world around him. This change was coming from a place that was both mysterious and feared, a place that held secrets older than Ogadugba itself. At the very edge of Ogadugba lay a dense and mysterious forest called Anioma. It wasn't like the other forests around. This one felt different, older, almost alive. The people of Ogadugba spoke of it with a mixture of awe and fear. They said it breathed with the spirits of long-dead ancestors and held secrets that had never been told. The old men and women of the town would tell stories around the fires at night about strange creatures that could change their shape in the blink of an eye, about powerful spirits that punished those who were too proud or who broke the ancient laws, and about giant pythons whose scales shone like green jewels and who could speak in riddles that could confuse even the wisest minds. Because of these stories and the feeling of the forest itself, no one in Ogadugba dared to venture deep into Anioma. Not even the strongest and bravest hunters who weren't afraid of wild animals would go beyond the familiar paths at the edge of the woods. They felt that deeper within lay something unknown and potentially dangerous. But one day, the quiet balance between Ogadugba and the forest was disturbed. Something, or rather someone, emerged from the dark, silent depths of Anioma, stepping out of the realm of folklore and into the everyday life of the town. Her name was Adaz. Her arrival was quiet and unexpected. It happened on the busy day of the Eke market, one of the main market days in Ogadugba, when the town was filled with people buying and selling all sorts of goods. Amidst the noisy crowd, Adaz moved with a calm and graceful way that made her stand out. She wore a simple white cloth that wrapped around her body and fell to her feet. The whiteness of the cloth was so pure that it seemed to glow against her dark skin. Around her neck, she wore strings of coral beads that shimmered with a soft, inner light, like the surface of a river just as the sun begins to rise. Her skin was smooth and looked almost like polished stone, and her features were delicate but strong. But it was her eyes that people noticed most. They were dark and deep, and when she looked at you, it felt like she could see right through you, observing everything without saying a word. No one in Ogadugba had ever seen her before. She didn't talk much, and when she did, her voice was soft and gentle. She only bought a few things, some very spicy peppers and a small amount of snail meat, a local delicacy. She paid for her goods quietly, and then disappeared back into the crowd before the sun started to go down. After she had left, the people in the market started to whisper about her. Rumors began to spread through Ogadugba as quickly as dust carried by a strong wind. She must be from one of the villages nearby, some people said, their curiosity sparked by her unfamiliar face. Or maybe, others guessed, she is a widow who has lost her husband and is coming here to start a new life. They tried to imagine her story, where she came from, and why she had suddenly appeared in their town. But the oldest woman in the village, Mama Neka, whose memory was long and whose wisdom was respected by everyone, shook her head slowly when she heard the talk. Her old eyes, which had seen so much over the years, held a look of knowing unease. "That one," she muttered to a group of younger women gathered around her stall, her voice raspy with age, "is not from around here. Her eyes are too quiet. They have seen things that we cannot even imagine." Her mysterious words added a layer of mystery and a feeling of something unusual to Adaz's sudden appearance. And then, Solomon saw her. It wasn't just a quick look or a passing glance in the busy market. It was as if time itself paused for a moment. The usual noise of the marketplace, the shouts of vendors, the chatter of people, all faded into a distant hum. The bright colors of the fabrics and the food seemed to dim, and Solomon's entire attention focused on the woman who stood a short distance away, her fingers gently touching a basket of woven goods. In his life, Solomon had seen many beautiful women. He had learned how to recognize the signs of attraction, the way a woman looked at him, the little smiles and gestures that showed she was interested. He had become a master of charming them, of saying just the right things to win their attention and their affection. He had conquered many hearts in Ogodugba, leaving behind a trail of women who admired him and sometimes longed for him. But Adaz was different. When he looked at her, she didn't react in the way he was used to. There was no shy giggle, no lingering stare filled with admiration, not even the slightest hint of a smile that told him she was aware of his presence and perhaps interested. She simply glanced in his direction, a brief, almost impersonal look, and then turned her attention back to the basket, as if he were no more interesting than any other object in the market. In that single, fleeting moment, something shifted inside Solomon. The familiar thrill of knowing he was desired, the smug satisfaction of his power over women, was completely absent. Instead, a new feeling bloomed within him, one that he couldn't quite understand but that held a strong and unsettling pull. It was a mix of curiosity, a deep sense of intrigue, and something that felt almost like a challenge. For the first time in a long time, Solomon felt a flicker of something other than his usual confident control. He was deeply curious about this woman who seemed immune to his considerable charm, and perhaps, just perhaps, a little bothered by it. Adaz had become an enigma, a puzzle he suddenly felt a strong need to solve. And in that moment, without even thinking about it, Solomon was hooked. The chase, a game that he had always started and controlled, had begun in a way that was completely new and unexpected for him. Solomon's pursuit of Adaz became his main focus, something he thought about constantly. This was very different from his usual easy successes with women. He found himself using all the charming tricks that had always worked so well for him in the past. But with Adaz, each attempt seemed to fail. The sweet and flattering compliments that usually made women blush and their eyes sparkle seemed to have no effect on her. She would listen quietly, her dark eyes steady, and offer no real reaction. There was no sign of pleasure, no hint of dismissal, just a calm stillness. The carefully chosen gifts he offered, the finest pieces of colorful cloth, the sweetest and ripest mangoes, a delicate silver bracelet he had bought from a traveling trader, were all politely refused. Her voice would be calm and firm as she explained that she couldn't accept them. His casual invitations to walk by the river in the cool of the evening or to join the lively dances in the village square were met with the same serene no. Instead of the eager acceptance he had come to expect from women, Adaz would simply look at him with those deep, calm eyes, her gaze holding a depth that he couldn't understand, and say, in a voice that held no trace of mockery or playfulness, "You are not ready." Ready for what? The question kept repeating in Solomon's mind, like a persistent and annoying drumbeat. He had never faced such resistance before, such a strong and silent wall of composure. His pride, which was a big part of who he was, felt bruised and irritated by this unexpected rejection. He, Solomon, the man that every woman in Ogodugba seemed to desire, was being consistently turned away. It was an insult to his ego, a direct challenge to the image he had carefully built of himself as someone irresistible. He couldn't back down. The fact that she was so different, the sheer impossibility of his usual methods working on her, only made him more determined. Adaz had become a mystery, a locked door that he was now fiercely set on opening, no matter what it took. Weeks passed under the hot African sun. Solomon became a silent observer, his usual social life and his many casual relationships taking a back seat to his growing fascination with Adaz. He would watch her from a distance, like a shadow following her movements. He followed her as she walked to the stream to fetch water, balancing the heavy pot on her head with effortless grace. He watched as she tended a small garden behind the simple dwelling where she lived, her hands moving gently among the plants. He even followed her to the marketplace on the days she went to buy her few necessities, always keeping a discreet distance. He learned small details about her life, her quiet routines, the way she interacted with the few people she spoke to. He discovered that she lived in a small, unassuming compound built near the edge of the forest, a place that seemed to have appeared recently, as no one in Ogadugba could clearly remember it being there before her arrival. He tried other ways to reach her. He sent messages through young children, carefully written letters filled with poetic words and promises of deep affection. Each message was returned, unopened, sometimes even burned right in front of the children before they could leave, the smoke a silent and bitter sign of her disinterest. Then, one night, when the moon was completely hidden and the darkness was thick and deep, Adaz appeared at his own doorstep. The new moon night was said to be a time when the spirit world was close to the living world, and the air felt heavy with an unseen energy. Adaz stood in the faint silver light that filtered through the palm tree leaves overhead, a silent and almost ghostly figure. Her face was unreadable in the dim light, her dark eyes holding a mystery that both intrigued him and made him feel a little uneasy. "Follow me," she said, her voice low and flat, without any clear emotion. She didn't offer any explanation about why she had come or where she was going. There was no hint of what might await him. It was just a simple, direct command. And Solomon, his usual arrogance momentarily overshadowed by a strong mix of obsession and a desperate need to finally understand this enigmatic woman, followed her without asking any questions. The chase, it seemed, had finally reached a turning point, though the path ahead was shrouded in an unsettling darkness, leading him away from the familiar safety of Ogadugba and into the mysterious embrace of the forest. They walked through the night in complete silence, their footsteps making soft sounds on the earth covered with fallen leaves. The air was thick with the sweet, heavy smell of night-blooming hibiscus flowers, mixed with another scent that was earthy, old, and slightly strange. It smelled of damp soil and decaying leaves, of secrets that had been hidden under the roots of big trees for a long time. As they went deeper into Anioma, the darkness seemed to press in around them. The trees, with their twisted branches reaching up like bony fingers, seemed to lean closer, their leaves rustling softly in a way that didn't sound like the wind, but more like quiet whispers from unseen beings. Moonlight, broken by the thick leaves above, fell in long, pale lines, sometimes lighting their way, but mostly creating long, distorted shadows that moved and danced around them like playful spirits. The usual sounds of the forest at night, the chirping of crickets, the croaking of frogs, the hooting of owls, were strangely absent, replaced by a heavy stillness that made Solomon feel a prickle of fear on his skin. Adaz moved with a quick and steady pace, her white cloth a pale shape in the darkness. Even though she looked delicate, there was a feeling of power in the way she moved, a smooth grace that suggested a strength beyond her slender body. Solomon, despite his initial excitement at finally being with her, found himself feeling more and more uneasy with her silent command and the strange, heavy atmosphere of the forest. Yet the thought of finally understanding Adaz, of getting the reward he believed was waiting for him at the end of their journey, kept him going. After what felt like a very long time, they reached a small, open space in the trees. In the middle of this clearing stood a compound, a group of buildings enclosed by a wall, unlike any Solomon had ever seen in Ogadugba. The walls were made of tightly packed red earth, and when he touched them, they felt smooth and cool. The roof was made of palm leaves, woven together so tightly that it seemed to become part of the forest itself. A strange, glowing blue flame flickered inside a large bowl made from a calabash gourd, placed near the entrance. This eerie light cast a strange, unsettling glow on the silent compound. There were no sounds coming from inside. He couldn't hear the bark of dogs, no voices of people talking, no familiar noises of life as he knew it. But Adaz, without any hesitation, reached out and pushed open a heavy wooden door that looked like it hadn't been used in a long time. It creaked loudly as it swung inward, the sound echoing in the stillness of the forest. The inside of the dwelling was dimly lit by several small clay lamps filled with burning oil. The flames flickered and danced, throwing long, moving shadows on the walls, making the room seem even more mysterious. The air inside was thick and heavy. It smelled strongly of sweet incense, the kind used in ceremonies, mixed with a sharp, bitter scent that Solomon couldn't quite place. It was an unusual combination that made his nose twitch. Adaz moved silently into a shadowy corner of the room and returned a moment later, carrying a drinking horn made from the horn of a cow. It was filled with a dark, reddish liquid. She held it out to him. "Palm wine," she said simply, her voice still flat and without much expression. Solomon took the horn from her hand and took a cautious sip. The liquid tasted sweet at first, almost like honey, but the sweetness quickly changed to a thick, almost metallic taste that stayed on his tongue and made him feel a little strange. Adaz then began to move. There was no music that Solomon could hear, no drums beating or flutes playing, yet she started to sway and glide across the bare earth floor with a slow, mesmerizing rhythm. Her hips moved in a way that was both graceful and hypnotic, and her arms flowed like water. Her dark eyes never left his. They were fixed on him, watching him intently. With each passing second, Solomon felt himself falling deeper under her spell. A strange feeling of tiredness washed over him, and his thoughts seemed to become hazy. He couldn't look away from her. Then, as her dance reached its peak, a daisy slowly moved towards him. Her hands were cool when she touched his face, but her breath felt hot against his ear as she leaned in close. And then they made love. It was an experience unlike any Solomon had ever had before. It was both wild and slow, urgent and dreamlike. The room seemed to spin around him, or maybe it was just his mind playing tricks. He couldn't tell what was real and what wasn't. She whispered words in his ear, a language he didn't recognize, sounds that seemed to come from a long time ago. Afterward, he lay back on the floor, feeling satisfied and strangely triumphant. He had finally been with Adaz. He had solved the puzzle. "I told you, you were not ready," she said, her voice soft but clear. Solomon laughed weakly, still feeling a little dazed. "Yet here I am." She turned her head and looked directly at him, her dark eyes gleaming in the dim light of the oil lamps. "Yes, here you are." And then, something terrifying began to happen. Solomon watched in disbelief as Adaz's legs seemed to melt together, the skin fusing and changing. Her skin, which had been smooth and soft, began to shimmer and take on a strange, wet look, like the scales of a fish. Her eyes, which had been dark and deep, started to glow with a golden light and narrowed into thin slits like those of a snake. Her body began to stretch and lengthen, coiling and growing, becoming long and sinuous. Solomon's smile faded, his feeling of triumph turning into confusion and then into pure, unadulterated horror. He tried to move, to get away, to scream, but his body felt heavy and unresponsive, as if he were trapped in a nightmare. Before he could do anything, before a sound could even escape his lips, Adaz's mouth opened wide, impossibly wide, wider than any human mouth could open. And with terrifying speed, she struck. The last thing Solomon saw was the ceiling of the strange forest house spinning above him as the enormous python, the creature that Adaz had become, coiled its powerful body around him, squeezing the life out of him. And then, in a swift and horrifying motion, it opened its massive jaws and swallowed him whole. The strange house in the forest returned to silence, the only sound the gentle flickering of the oil lamps. Adaz, the beautiful woman who was also a powerful serpent spirit, slithered silently into the shadows of the forest, her duty, whatever it was, now complete. And back in Ogadugba, the women who had once been captivated by Solomon's charm slept soundly for the first time in many years, unaware of the fate that had befallen the man everyone had once desired. The whispers about Solomon would eventually fade, replaced by new stories and new happenings in the vibrant life of the town. But the tale of the mysterious woman who came from the forest, and the man who couldn't resist her allure, would linger in the memories of the elders, a cautionary story whispered in hushed tones around the crackling fires, a reminder that some desires can lead to the darkest of ends.